303 people dead, 279 missing, buried under mud and debris so thick that rescue teams can't reach them. 80,000 people driven from their homes by a wall of water and landslides that obliterated entire villages in minutes. This is Sumatra, Indonesia, right now. And what triggered this catastrophe was a weather event so rare that meteorologists are calling it a once-in-a-generation anomaly, a tropical cyclone that shouldn't exist, forming where cyclones never form, unleashing rainfall so intense it turned mountainsides into rivers of mud and transformed peaceful valleys into graveyards. Indonesia's deadliest disaster of 2025, and the death toll is still climbing. On November 25, 2025, Tropical Cyclone Senyar, a storm that by all meteorological logic should not exist, slammed into the Indonesian island of Sumatra with catastrophic force. The cyclone formed in the Strait of Malacca, the narrow waterway between Sumatra and Malaysia, at approximately 5 degrees latitude from the equator. And that location is the key to understanding why this disaster is so unprecedented. Tropical cyclones don't form near the equator. The physics won't allow it. The Coriolis effect, or the force created by Earth's rotation that gives cyclones their characteristic spin, is too weak within about 5 degrees of the equator to sustain organized tropical systems. Cyclones form in tropical waters farther from the equator, then spin away toward the poles. But Senyar defied that rule. It formed, strengthened, and struck, all within that meteorological dead zone. The result was catastrophic. Torrential rains pounded 3 provinces, North Sumatra, West Sumatra, and Aceh, for days. Not normal monsoon rain. Cyclonic deluge, rainfall rates measured in centimeters per hour. Rivers surged beyond their banks within minutes. Flash floods roared down valleys, carrying everything in their path. And on the steep volcanic slopes that define Sumatra's interior, the rain triggered something even deadlier. Massive landslides that buried entire communities under meters of mud, rock, and debris. As of November 30th, the confirmed death toll stands at 303 people. But that number tells only part of the story. 279 people remain missing, and with each passing hour, the chances of finding them alive diminish to 0. But here's what makes this truly alarming. Cyclone Senyar is a meteorological nightmare, a storm that rewrites the rulebook on where and how tropical cyclones can form, and the science behind its existence reveals a climate system pushed to dangerous extremes. The Coriolis effect, essential for tropical cyclone formation, is generated by Earth's rotation. As you move away from the equator toward the poles, this effect strengthens. It's what gives hurricanes and typhoons their characteristic rotating structure. But within about 5 degrees latitude of the equator, the Coriolis effect is too weak to sustain that rotation. Thunderstorms can form, rainfall can be intense, but organized tropical cyclones with defined circulation patterns simply don't happen. Until now. MERS Senyar formed at approximately 5 degrees north latitude in the Strait of Malacca, the exact threshold where cyclone formation becomes theoretically possible, but practically almost unheard of. Meteorologists studying the system believe it was triggered by an unusual interaction with Typhoon Koto, which was simultaneously affecting the Philippines to the northeast. The energy transfer between these two systems, combined with abnormally warm sea surface temperatures in the Strait of Malacca, created conditions that allowed Senyar to organize and strengthen into a Category 1 equivalent tropical cyclone. But the storm's rarity isn't the only factor that made this disaster so deadly. Sumatra's geography turned rainfall into a weapon. The island is dominated by steep volcanic mountain ranges, the Bukit Barisan Range running the length of the island. When cyclonic rains hit those slopes, gravity does the rest. Water concentrates in valleys and drainage channels, accelerating to devastating speeds. And the saturated volcanic soil, already heavy with moisture from monsoon season, becomes unstable. The result? Landslides of staggering scale, entire hillsides liquefying and sliding downslope at speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour. Villages in valleys below had no warning, no time to evacuate. The first sign of danger was the rumble of approaching debris. And by then, escape was impossible, and there's a human factor that made it worse: deforestation. When rescue teams arrived in the hardest-hit areas, they found massive logs mixed with the mud and debris. Evidence of illegal logging and forest clearance in upstream watersheds. And when you look at the numbers, the picture gets even more disturbing. The numbers emerging from Sumatra paint a picture of devastation on a scale Indonesia hasn't seen in years. Confirmed deaths by province, North Sumatra leads with 166 fatalities. West Sumatra follows with 90 deaths. Aceh province reports 47 confirmed dead. Total, 303 lives lost as of November 30th. And that number continues to rise as rescue teams reach previously inaccessible areas. Missing persons? 279 people remain unaccounted for. Many are believed to be buried under landslide debris that in some locations measures over 10 meters deep. Heavy equipment operators report that the mud is so thick and unstable that excavators are getting bogged down attempting to reach potential victims. Displaced populations. Approximately 80,000 people have been forced from their homes. About 59,660 families are currently housed in temporary government shelters. Schools, community centers, mosques, any building that survived the floods. Infrastructure destruction. Over 17,000 houses destroyed or submerged in West Sumatra alone. That's just one province. Casualty assessment teams are still cataloging damage in North Sumatra and Aceh. Key bridges have collapsed in Beroan District, Aceh, severing the main transport artery between Medan and Banda Aceh. Entire districts like central Tapanuli have been cut off for days. No roads, no power, no communications. Injuries. Over 500 people requiring medical treatment for flood-related trauma, lacerations, crush injuries, and respiratory distress from contaminated water. And the human toll extends beyond statistics, because numbers on a screen don't capture what this means for the people living in the shadow of this threat. 80,000 people displaced. That's the entire population of a mid-sized city, suddenly homeless, sheltering in gymnasiums and community halls with nothing but the clothes they managed to grab before the water hit. The scenes from evacuation centers across Sumatra are heartbreaking. Families sleeping on concrete floors, children crying for parents who didn't make it out, elderly residents suffering in the humid, overcrowded conditions with no access to medication. And outside those shelters, the devastation is total. In central Tapanuli district, entire neighborhoods have vanished, not damaged, vanished, buried under landslides that deposited 10 meters of mud and debris where homes once stood. Rescue teams are using heavy machinery to excavate. But progress is measured in meters per day. And with each meter they dig, the grim reality becomes clearer. The chance of finding survivors under that much debris is effectively zero. They're recovering bodies now, not rescuing victims. And in the areas that weren't buried, the flooding has created its own nightmare. 17,000 homes submerged in West Sumatra. Water contaminated with sewage, chemicals, and decomposing organic matter. Disease vectors multiplying in standing water. Mosquitoes breeding. Cholera risk spiking. Dysentery outbreaks inevitable. Infrastructure collapse has isolated entire communities. The bridge collapse in Beroan District, Aceh, has cut off the main road linking Medan and Banda Aceh. Residents are forced to cross rivers using small boats to access basic supplies. The Indonesian Air Force has been deploying transport aircraft to airdrop food and emergency supplies to villages where roads have been completely washed out. But perhaps the most disturbing development is the breakdown of social order. Reports from central Tapanuli confirm that desperation has set in. Residents have begun looting aid trucks and local food stocks because official distribution systems have collapsed under the scale of the disaster. When people don't know where their next meal is coming from, when their children are hungry and the government can't reach them, survival instinct overrides everything else. And for those hoping this will simply calm down, the experts have bad news. The Indonesian Meteorology, Climatology and Geophysics Agency, BMKG, is issuing warnings that while Cyclone Senyar has dissipated or moved away from Sumatra, the atmospheric dynamics remain dangerously unstable. Heavy monsoon rains are forecast to continue for days, and that rainfall, hitting already saturated soil on steep volcanic slopes, creates the perfect conditions for secondary landslides. Disaster management officials are describing the current situation as a race against time. The longer rescue operations are delayed by weather and infrastructure damage, the higher the risk of disease outbreaks in crowded evacuation centers. Water systems across affected areas are contaminated. Sanitation infrastructure has been destroyed, and thousands of people are living in close quarters with limited access to clean water and medical care. The disease threat is real and immediate. Indonesia's Ministry of Health has deployed medical teams to monitor for cholera, dysentery, typhoid, and dengue fever, all waterborne or vector-borne diseases that thrive in post-flood conditions. With thousands of homes submerged and standing water everywhere, mosquito populations are exploding. And in evacuation centers where hygiene conditions are poor, a single case of cholera can trigger an explosive outbreak. Environmental groups are also raising alarms about the role of deforestation in amplifying the disaster. The massive logs found mixed with landslide debris are evidence that illegal logging upstream destabilized watersheds and worsened both flooding and landslides. Because what the data is showing now suggests something even more troubling. The disaster timeline reveals how quickly a rare meteorological event can cascade into a national catastrophe. November the 25th, Tropical Cyclone Senyar makes landfall on Sumatra. Initial reports indicate severe flooding in coastal areas. Casualty estimates are in the dozens. November 26th, as the full scale of the disaster becomes clear, the death toll jumps to over 100. Landslides in mountainous interior regions are reported. Communications with Central Tapanuli District are lost. November the 27th, death toll reaches 164 as rescue teams begin reaching previously inaccessible areas. The Indonesian government declares states of emergency in North Sumatra, West Sumatra, and Aceh provinces. November 28th, casualty count surges to 174, then 248 as entire buried villages are discovered. The number of missing persons climbs past 200. November 29th to 30th, death toll crosses 300. 279 people remain missing. Heavy equipment shortages are slowing body recovery, and continuous rainfall is preventing helicopter evacuations from remote areas. The pattern is clear: the disaster isn't a single event. It's a cascading failure. Floods trigger landslides. Landslides bury communities and block roads. Blocked roads prevent rescue. Delayed rescue allows disease to take hold, and ongoing rainfall threatens new landslides on already destabilized slopes. And history tells us exactly what patterns like this can lead to. The last time a tropical cyclone formed this close to the equator was December 27, 2001, Cyclone Vame. That storm also formed in the South China Sea near the Strait of Malacca at approximately 1.5 degrees north latitude. It killed 5 people in Malaysia and caused widespread flooding across the region. But Vame was smaller and shorter-lived than Senyar, and it didn't strike Sumatra's steep volcanic interior where geography amplifies every disaster. Indonesia has a long history of deadly floods and landslides, but the combination of a rare near-equatorial cyclone, deforestation, destabilized watersheds, and densely populated mountain valleys has created a perfect storm of factors that made this disaster uniquely catastrophic. The last time Indonesia lost over 300 people to flooding and landslides in a single event, the recovery took years. And right now, the same warning signs are flashing. As of November 30th, 2025, 3 Indonesian provinces remain under declared states of emergency. Aceh's emergency declaration runs until December 11th, North Sumatra's until December 10th, West Sumatra's until December 8th. These declarations unlock emergency funding and allow the central government to mobilize military resources for disaster response. The Indonesian Air Force has deployed transport aircraft to conduct airdrops of food, water, and medical supplies to villages cut off by destroyed roads and bridges. But aircraft availability is limited. and weather conditions continue to hamper flight operations. On the ground, the critical shortage isn't just supplies, it's heavy equipment. Disaster response teams report that they lack sufficient excavators and bulldozers to clear landslide debris and recover bodies. Private construction companies have been contracted to provide additional machinery, but transporting heavy equipment to remote mountain areas with destroyed roads is a logistical nightmare, and the infrastructure damage extends beyond transport. Power grids across affected areas remain down. Communications networks are only partially functional. Water treatment plants are offline or damaged. The basic systems that modern communities depend on have ceased functioning. But the real question everyone is asking is terrifying. The immediate disaster may be subsiding, but the secondary threats are just beginning. Disease outbreak scenario. With thousands of homes submerged, sanitation systems destroyed, and water sources contaminated, the conditions for epidemic disease are ideal. Cholera thrives in contaminated water. Dysentery spreads rapidly in crowded shelters with poor hygiene. Dengue fever mosquitoes breed in standing water. Indonesia's Ministry of Health is mobilizing medical teams, but if an outbreak begins in remote areas with limited medical infrastructure, containment will be nearly impossible. Secondary landslide scenario. BMKG forecasts indicate continued heavy rainfall for the coming days. The soil on Sumatra's volcanic slopes is already saturated and unstable. Additional rainfall could trigger new landslides in areas not yet affected, or cause previously stable slopes to collapse onto rescue operations and evacuation routes. Long-term recovery scenario. Even in the best case, no disease outbreaks, no additional landslides, the recovery timeline stretches into years. 17,000 homes destroyed in one province alone. Critical bridges collapsed, water systems contaminated. Agricultural land buried under meters of mud. The economic impact will devastate communities that were already struggling before the disaster. And with 279 people still missing, every hour that passes makes it more likely that this disaster's final death toll will climb significantly higher than 303. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes this so dangerous. The search continues, but hope is fading. 279 people remain unaccounted for, most believed to be buried under landslide debris that rescue teams cannot safely excavate, while rainfall continues and slopes remain unstable. 80,000 people remain displaced, living in temporary shelters with no clear timeline for when they can return home. For many, there's nothing to return to. Their villages are gone, buried, wiped from the landscape. The Indonesian government has committed to rebuilding, but the scale of destruction is overwhelming. And with monsoon season continuing, the threat of additional flooding and landslides persists. BMKG meteorologists cannot guarantee that another weather system won't develop and strike the same devastated areas before recovery even begins. Environmental groups continue to raise alarms about deforestation's role in amplifying the disaster. If illegal logging and forest clearance continue unchecked, the next heavy rainfall event could trigger similarly catastrophic landslides. And the fundamental reality remains. Cyclone Senyar was a meteorological anomaly, but climate scientists warn that as ocean temperatures rise and atmospheric patterns shift, these once-in-a-generation events may become more frequent. The rare is becoming common, and Indonesia is on the front lines. 303 dead. 279 missing, 80,000 displaced, and the rain hasn't stopped. Indonesia's deadliest disaster of 2025 is still unfolding. Share this story. Keep pressure on relief organizations. Demand accountability for illegal deforestation, because when the storms come, people die.